Welcome to Kvetchfest. I'm Jen.
And I'm Debbie.
We're Jewish.
So we like to kvetch.
I like to complain.
And I like to discuss things.
I grew up with my mom talking about all sorts of stuff. So I thought it would be fun to bring her onto Kvetchfest so we can have more conversations about life, politics, and everything in between.
I'm a boomer.
And I'm a millennial.
Our different perspectives could lead to shared insights, differing opinions, and new realizations about the world, ourselves, and our relationship. Be part of our community as we explore more together in relationship as parent and child.
Complaining can be cathartic, so let's kvetch together. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Kvetchfest. I'm Jen.
I'm Debbie.
And today we're going to be talking about our love for documentary films. This is going to be hard to distill because I think there's so many things we can talk about with documentaries. I think there's so many cool things about documentaries that I really enjoy, and I just love learning and listening to the human experience or any type of knowledge about anything on the earth. I'm like just endlessly curious. So documentaries really fill a nice part of my life when I get to watch something entertaining and also informative. And I guess they're visual podcasts in a way. I don't even know where to kick this off, but I guess documentaries used to be boring in my youth, and now I can't wait to get home and have some dessert and watch a true crime doc or whatever documentary on the next aliens is out. I'm really open to all different kinds of documentaries. I'll even go as far as to say documentaries about conspiracy theories. Not that I am a conspiracy theorist, but I just find it fascinating that people are or try to make connections to things that maybe aren't actually connected. I just find everything fascinating, and there's just sparks my curiosity. So I'll hand it over to you, Mom. What kind of documentaries do you like, and when did you start enjoying them?
Well, it's interesting because you said a bunch of things about documentaries that I thought of, some the same and other something else that I hadn't thought of, but I started to wonder what actually makes a documentary a documentary.
Mm-hmm.
But I think my first probably understanding of a documentary in the sort of way that I'm thinking of it was probably on PBS, because I used to think PBS was for sort of people who were the intellectuals. They didn't really want to watch TV that was sort of fluff, but they had to watch things that wanted to watch things that had more depth to them. So I think I throughout my adulthood, I probably went on to PBS a few times to check things out. And then more so when they started doing series TV. But I think that was when I first understood what maybe a documentary was. And I think back in those days when I was younger, they weren't as slick as they are now. So they may have seemed boring to some folks,
Mm-hmm.
but it may have just been a narrator talking about one particular thing. But now I think they're way more layered and they are more slick because they can do so much more now with
Yeah.
enhancements of things and actually going to places and showing you where things are happening and all
Mm-hmm.
that.
I also
So,
think too there's still bias when it comes to documentaries, and it's kind of, some people I think do their best in having it be unbiased or just kind of laying out the facts of the situation. But I still think you have to understand where a documentary is leaning. And sometimes there's documentaries on the same topic from 5 different producers or people, and they all lean into different parts of the story. But I think what I love about documentaries, and maybe you're going to speak to this too, is storytelling. I'm really
yes.
into hearing people's stories. And I think people who get to do that, who go up and interview people, I love that. And I think that's something I could do in another life, or this one maybe. But I just love the courage that people just do that and knock on people's doors and get rejected and don't take it personally and try it again the next day. And then they really try to get the word on whatever the topic is. So I find that really admirable in a lot of ways
Oh,
too.
yeah,
Journalism
totally.
is really admirable to me.
Oh, yeah, because they have a lot of chutzpah.
A
And
lot
not
of
in a bad,
chutzpah.
not in a way that they're, barreling down doors or being rude or chasing after people,
Mhm.
although sometimes they do chase after people. But I think it's because they're doing it. They can perhaps separate themselves because this is their job and they want to get as much information as they can as possible, which you could also probably say about paparazzi. But paparazzi have
Mm.
also been given a bad rap because sometimes they just, get obnoxious and get into people's faces. And if somebody says no, it's no, but this is how they make their living and they get big bucks for some photos and things. So there is a fine line between being a jerk and doing your professional best, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Just like in real life.
Right.
But I guess I always thought that I was always sort of as a younger person, I always wondered how they actually lived, how they were able to make money doing what I thought was a really kind of, I call it a savory life, meaning that it just had a lot of depth of flavor to me. And they got to
Mm.
do this job that seemed like no other job none of my family did anything like that. They were either behind desks or building things or, right, or teaching or whatever. So this seemed to be like, wow, this is like a charmed life if you can be a documentarian somehow.
Mhm.
I'm sure documentarians wouldn't consider it that way. But yeah, but I feel
But it
like
is documenting history in a way.
it is the good, the
Yeah.
bad, and yeah, and the indifferent. Yeah,
Mhm.
totally, totally. So I guess for me, the documentary has this sort of feeling of authenticity, even if it
Mhm.
might be bogus, because let's face it, everybody's learning how to make things look mainstream. Right? And so
Mhm.
it's really hard to discern what's actually real from what's not real.
Mhm.
Obviously, we've had that conversation before, and we're all talking about AI and stuff, but just the feeling of, for me, it's the feeling of the way the documentary is presented and the narration.
Mhm.
Somehow then it depends on the person who's narrating, but when the narration is really good, you get really drawn in, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why
So,
Planet
yeah.
Earth is so popular with David Attenborough.
Right, right.
His
Exactly.
voiceover is just, yeah, really
Right.
nice. Mhm.
And there's also Morgan Freeman,
Yeah.
who sucks me in
Oh, totally.
all the time,
Yes.
Yes, yeah, so
I watched the Martha Stewart documentary that just came out.
oh, yes.
Yeah, and they have narrators from her life. They don't actually show them sitting down, which I thought was an interesting choice. So that was interesting to me because normally when you're interviewing people from someone's life, they sit you down in a chair and there's the shots on them and they go back and forth between those people throughout the documentary. But this time it was just narration from her life, and I was like, oh, that's an interesting way to do it. So there's all different ways you can move a story along with a documentary too, which I find interesting.
Right, I guess it could be that maybe they thought that would be distracting, I don't know.
Hmm.
There's just different styles. I was thinking back to when I was younger, and I don't remember a lot of times when there was an interview actually seeing the interviewer. But I think that
Mm,
started to come into play maybe in the '70s, so I'm not sure, where you actually got a real quick look at the person who's asking the questions, and now it's more of a back
hmm.
and forth between the interviewer and the interviewee.
Yeah, and sometimes they're even showing behind the scenes. They're
Right.
showing a little bit of the set that's not lit
Yeah.
up, or like a little bit of the tripod, or they
Right.
are showing pieces of the process, which I think is interesting too, versus just the nicely made image, the final
Right.
image. So I think it's intriguing for people to get to see that, and it's kind of like a painting in that way where you get to see like a little bit of the pieces that make it come together.
Yeah, it's a good way of putting that. I guess that also, maybe it's to help people understand what the process is, and it sort of
Hmm.
makes me think of, like, when the series Modern Family came out and they broke the fourth wall and they started talking to the audience.
Yeah.
Now there are so many shows like that where they look right over to the audience, right?
Yes.
So that
Yes.
seems to be a big hit with the audience. I think that also happens in theater at times where
Hmm.
intentionally they'll
Yeah.
talk directly to the audience, and I think that just brings the audience in. It doesn't keeps them on this tension between the reality of life and then the fantasy of what they're watching, and I think
Right.
that's a pretty interesting place to, it's like a tightrope that you're
Yes.
sort of sitting on, and I think that's really, I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
So I like when documentaries, when you can see the person who is interviewing also
Hmm.
is kinda cool.
I agree. I agree. I
Yeah.
watched a documentary a little while back about a son who has is trying to figure out who murdered his mom,
Right.
and really heavy. But I mean, there's a lot of behind the scenes, and he is also in with he shows himself interviewing his family members, things like that. It's like, I don't know, I really related to his story in a way because he's trying to get answers from family members, and I can only imagine how difficult that is to interview your own family members about really difficult topics on camera, no less, and then also with other recording devices. But yeah, I just really enjoyed that documentary, though it was very sad. The pieces of putting it together when they're shown as well for the final version is also, it helps you relate to something. It helps you see the process and the arduousness of a task like documentary filmmaking or finding answers in your own family, things like that. So that kind of goes back to that journalistic documentary style as well that I find really admirable.
Would you consider, yeah, that it is admirable. Would you consider Dateline and 48 Hours and 2020 documentaries?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Anything that's not like scripted. Or I mean, it's scripted to a certain extent where, like, you have an idea of how the episode's gonna go. You have the formula for the episode, the intro, the outro, all those things, like, where you're gonna put all the pieces in. So it's scripted in that way, but you're formulating a story based on what the interviewers are giving you and based on the evidence or all this stuff. So I do think that those shows are documentaries as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's because I never thought about them as documentaries until we start thinking about this.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess when you think of series TV, you don't often think, because I used to think that documentaries were really special. When
Mhm.
I was a kid, to me, there wasn't a lot of documentaries. But
Yeah.
now, you can go on any of the streaming services and there's slews of things. And you're like, and
And
a
all
person
different
like me,
genres. Yeah.
yes, and for a person like me who likes to peer into other people's lives,
Mhm. Yes, me too.
yeah,
I'm a
I
voyeur.
I am big time. I think
Yeah.
that comes from I feel like I don't know where it comes from exactly, but I know my grandmother kind of sort of instilled that with me. I remember her taking me when I was, yeah, this is crazy. When I was maybe a early teen, we went
Mhm.
to an actress's house who it was on sale in Beverly Hills. Her name was Abby Lane. I think that was her name. Anyway, it was her home in Beverly Hills, and it was an open house. And my grandmother purely went there because she was curious and wanted to see what this house was like. And I remember it was for sale for $240,000. And I thought, wow, that's a lot of money. But now it'd be
Oh
millions,
my
of
gosh,
course.
millions, yeah.
Yeah, but we went through all these rooms and they were highly decorated. And I remember a lot of blues. And I just remember thinking, wow, this is cool. So when I was a kid, I spent a year in Las Vegas when my dad moved out of state for work. I went to go look at model homes that were being built that were all decorated. And so I remember feeling that same feeling of wanting to peer into somebody else's life or the possibility of a different kind of life. And so I'm still like that. I love to look into people's windows when I'm riding in a car. And I like the nighttime when the windows are glowing just to see what could possibly be happening behind that. So I think
Mhm.
documentaries for me has that same sort of feel
Yeah, it's a
that,
window.
yeah, I get to be involved in that. But for me, like documentaries that are crime, like you talked about, for me, it's how the law enforcement come together and figure out things.
Mhm.
So I guess for me, it's the depth of the ability to get deep in a short amount of time within a certain subject and the people within that
Mhm.
subject
Yeah,
that I feel
absolutely.
that really, that's when I said savory. It feels like it feels like a good meal, right? When you get to, sometimes you don't want it to end. You're
Right.
like, they end it, you're going, no, don't,
No.
I want it. I still want to live in this bubble of that documentary.
Right.
Unless it's something really heinous and gross, and I'm not going
Sure.
to.
Right, right,
But
right.
generally, I don't pick those kinds of documentaries to watch anyway.
Yeah.
But you said earlier about the human experience, and I was thinking about something today, not because we were going to do this, but it just because I'm always thinking about things, popped into my head
No
that I'm
way.
like this, what I think is like this uber empath.
Mhm.
And I started to wonder, and I was going to bring this up in my therapy session next week or whenever it is next month. If Uber empaths don't need this is good. This. I'll tie it to documentaries in a
No,
minute.
I'm
If
I'm
Uber
on the edge of my seat right now.
if empaths don't need to actually live the experience because they are so intuitive of the experience that they can already understand the experience without having to live it.
Mhm.
Does that make sense to you? So that
Yeah.
when I watch a documentary, look, I don't want to live an experience of somebody a crime experience. I'm not talking about that, but I'm talking
Mhm.
about that I and I'm not sure, and maybe other empaths will think about this, but that empaths can be very observational and detail oriented, and they have these feelings so they can already understand something or someone without
Mhm.
having to actually be there or do that.
Right.
Does
Yes.
that make sense? Like, I'm
Yeah.
already what I consider an open mindset type of person, so, sure, I wanna travel, but I don't have to go necessarily to Antarctica to understand what it might be like coming back from that,
Mhm.
right? Now,
Right.
maybe I would have a more layered experience, but I'm just wondering if empaths, when they watch documentaries, can for other people might say, "Ew, that is why how could she possibly have done that?" But empaths will understand, "Well, I can see that because that's on the spectrum of the human experience."
Mhm.
So I'm not going to, like, throw my hands up and look away. I'm gonna understand the possibility of a human being doing something that we might not do or whatever, but understanding that that's within even though it could be the abnormal side of the spectrum, I feel like as an empath, you have like this more open understanding of how people can possibly do the things they
Mhm.
do.
Yeah.
And on the other hand,
Definitely.
that would also be not accepting everybody's experience, but accepting those experiences that aren't harmful to other people. So that's kind of what happens when I watch a documentary. I don't immediately write off the people in it. Sometimes I go, oh, come on, how could you have believed that? Or, right. But I often
Yeah.
understand based on based on what I'm being offered, how this person could have gotten themselves into this thing
Yeah. Yeah.
or chose that career or had that
Joined a
relationship.
cult.
Right. I can kind of
Yeah.
not that I might do that, but I feel like I have this ability to be much more understanding
Mhm.
of that where other people would go, that is horrendous. I might say, well, wait a minute.
Right.
Let's look at all the things that transpired that could have got that person to that point. And I'm
Right.
not talking about befriending a psychopath, but I certainly
Yes.
can understand the pathology of that. Would I ever
Right.
do anything like that? Absolutely not.
No, but see, but a lot of times psychopaths are regular people who don't
Mhm.
act on any of the things that other psychopaths have acted. You know what I mean? Like
Oh,
there's
for sure.
that, which is interesting too. So yeah, I hear you what you're saying though. I
Right.
also wonder if documentaries for us helps us to be able to do that. It's entertainment, sure, but it's also a
Right.
way to learn from other people and open a door into their life. And then we also become more empathetic to that story. And so to those people that experience something like that. So I think it's expanding our world in that way.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's spot on. I mean, sometimes I that is absolutely true. And of course, other times I come away from a documentary and say, whoa, I can't believe they got caught up in that or but
Yes.
still it does make me think about things on a maybe on a on not up to that ratcheted thing that they went through, but
Yeah.
the how you could possibly keep yourself
Right.
from getting to that point.
Quasi, yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
also find, okay, this is really interesting too, and I don't know if you've thought about this, but documentaries have opened me up to a world of different possibilities and circumstances where it's like I'll watch a documentary about a certain topic or story and just think, wow, how did that person have that experience? Or how did they get into those circumstances? Or what transpired that possibly got this group of people together for this thing? It's so specific
Right.
And you're just like, "What the heck? That's wild," or "That's bizarre," or "That's grotesque," or whatever it is. It's like, "Oh my
Right.
god, you were involved in this thing and that thing." It's just so interesting to me, whereas I think some people just, like, turn it off and are like, "Okay, that's just we're gonna block that off. That's a boundary," or whatever. But I think for
Right.
people like you and I, well, a lot of things had to happen for that to occur and for that situation to transpire. And then you think about your own life and you're like, "Oh, interesting. I've had maybe glimpses of that in my own life where particular things have transpired," and you're just like, how is that possible? I'll just say, for instance, randomly seeing someone from your past on a sidewalk or things like that that you can't possibly predict.
Right.
But I think documentaries sometimes the unpredictability, but also the coincidences of life kind of show up. And that's what makes these stories really interesting. You just can't possibly understand some of these situations that people are in too. And then
Oh,
the
absolutely.
choices they have to make based on those
Right.
specific set of circumstances at that specific time. And I think
Right.
that's also something that's really hard for people to understand because we go, "Oh, why would you make that choice or choices?" But we have no idea because we weren't in that situation with those particular set of circumstances.
Sure, sure, sure. I think that's
Yeah.
the compromises that people make
Mhm.
for whether it's to advance their career, let's just say, or whether it's to placate a family member or whatever it is. It does come to a lot of documentaries. I think you can parse out where the boundaries sort of weren't there or fell apart.
Right.
Right, or actually were created. There's those documentaries too, where
Mhm.
boundaries are created.
Mhm.
But I think what's interesting is, especially with crime documentaries, the whole DNA genealogy thing, where people are finding connections. That's crazy, and I wish we could all be part of some of these programs where, like, the Finding Your Roots
Mhm.
and stuff, because I think it might inflame some people, but then
Mhm.
also it might really people might have to come to terms with things that they thought they weren't, and they find out they are. So I think that's what's also good about documentaries, as we were saying, it
Mhm.
sort of really makes you peer into this human experience, which people want to really control their humanity,
Right.
but there's no you can't do
You
that.
can't. I know, because when you think about it, it's like the fact that you exist right now is based on probably a lot of good and bad choices in the world.
Yes. A lot of senseless sex.
Yeah. Or just like I
Yeah.
was following someone on social media and he's perhaps of like Mexican or Hispanic descent and but he's looks like a white guy but has like blue eyes and stuff and he's like, "Do you want to unpack why I have blue eyes in my genealogy?" It's like not for good reasons, so it's like,
Right.
oh, right. Looking through the lens of history,
Right.
yeah, there's a lot of nuance and a lot of shitty things that happen to people. And so I don't think people want to look into that. Generally, privileged folks don't want to look into their history. But see,
Oh, no,
for people like me, it's
yeah.
like put me on that show where I get to go to Europe or go to places where my ancestors lived, and I want to learn about their
Right.
existence. I want to know my lineage. I want to understand who these people before me. Where I get so excited about this, I can't talk. I really like history, so I think for me it's fascinating.
So
You
you
know,
should write into those shows because they do lay people,
do they? Oh,
non-celebrities.
just
Yes.
like regular old
They
blokes. Okay,
yeah, they will pick people.
okay,
Yeah, especially I think if you give them some of your background and they
yeah.
think that there might be something juicy there,
Ooh, do you think there's anything
then
juicy?
yeah.
Juicy Jewish stuff?
There could be juicy and Italian stuff
There
because
c
you're both.
I feel like both, yeah, there could be both for sure.
But would you say that, because I love Sunday morning.
Mhm.
I've always liked Sunday morning, and when it was on it's still on early in the morning, and when it was on early in the morning, I had little kids, I could watch it early in the morning, but now I just watch it Thursday night or something. But I sort of feel like Sunday morning has that same sort of lulls you in and gives
Mm,
you that feeling of being in a completely different space, and I feel like it's a set of mini documentaries.
yeah,
They're interviews. I get that they're interviews,
yeah.
but they seem to do
They
They
produce it really
seem to,
well.
yes, and
Yeah.
they ask the questions,
Mhm.
and it gets deep, and not all the questions are
Yeah.
answered,
And it's
and
soft.
it is.
Mhm.
It is, and they leave you in a, sometimes they leave you with unanswered questions, and then you can turn to your partner,
Yeah.
and like we did last night, and have this whole conversation about the Palestinian library and the Israeli library and how they're documenting October 7th and all this stuff, and it's just so much.
Yeah.
And the segment itself was so short,
Yes.
but it's a good leaping off point,
Yes.
right? And
Absolutely.
I
Yeah, they, like,
understand that.
ask you to join them. I think that's the takeaway with PBS, but sorry, we're with Sunday
Yeah,
morning.
with, Sunday Morning,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and
Mhm.
with PBS.
And with
Well, what I think I was gonna say was, there's so many people now because of social media
Mhm.
that are calling themselves documentarians,
Yeah.
and they are helping to solve cases, and they're going out and
Yeah.
finding things, and
Mhm.
I think if they're really doing it for the right reasons and they're not trying to ratchet up ridiculousness and cult things and controversial stuff that's not true, then I appreciate that because
Mhm.
they can be helpful. And I know some of these shows have utilized them in finding information that they couldn't find.
Mhm.
But you just have to be careful that they're doing it for the right reasons.
Totally. Yeah. I know,
Right.
'cause it
Right.
gets tricky fast.
It it does, and you're right. You said something earlier about conspiracy theories, of
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
like, why can't I think of that right now? And how you have to be careful when you're watching documentaries if, like, this
Yes.
is
Well, you have to use discernment. I think that
critical
gets
thinking.
lost. What's that?
Right.
Yeah.
Critical thinking.
Yeah, political thinking. Oh, critical, not political. But that too, I
That
guess.
too.
Where's my mind? But yeah, I mean, yeah, the conspiracy theorists, armchair experts, sometimes very useful, sometimes not so much. And I think we could all be armchair experts, right? I mean, those are just called opinions, aren't they? Sometimes.
Right. Yeah.
But what makes I mean, what I'm teaching my students right now is like we'll read a book and then I'll be like, "What did you learn in the book?" And then they'll make up this whole story and I'm like, "That's your imagination. That's an opinion." But I'm asking what you read in the book. Can you tell me what you read in the book? And I think that's adults are
Yeah.
missing that. It's like MIA. It's missing in action. Where did that bring me
Right.
three pieces of different evidence from different case studies or from the
Right. Right.
library, from the internet.
Right.
We don't do that anymore, it seems like in a lot of cases. So,
Yeah, and to ask kids, you can say, Pat was a character in our book. Where in the story did we find out that Pat did blah blah? And they have to go there and actually read for the information.
yeah, yeah.
And yeah, and then like, oh, he didn't really do blah blah. No, you may have wanted him to do, and that's great, but that's not what the author's asking you to do, to
Right,
understand.
exactly.
Right, right, right.
Yes.
So yeah,
Yep. Or
yeah.
today where
And look,
what were you gonna say?
no, I was gonna say documentaries the same way because
Yeah.
you and I can sit down to watch the same documentary, have completely different ideas of what we just saw.
Yes, because of our own life experience, right? We don't take that into account either, and I think it can be
Right.
really frustrating sometimes, and it also can be really nice. Today, I had reading a book with some third graders, and I was like, "Okay, we're going to talk about compromise. Have you ever had to compromise in your life?" And they're like, "What's compromise?" And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Okay." Then I asked the student to explain what compromise was, who thought he knew it. Anyway, so it gets into this whole conversation, but 3 times the student asked me, "What's compromise?" And I'm like, "I explained it 3 times. We've explained it." Okay, what's a fourth way that we can explain it? So partially, sometimes I feel like kids and adults aren't really that different. It's like, are you gonna listen or are you gonna be in your own world? And like
Right, right, right,
that's
right. Or where did you check out that you couldn't
yeah.
take that information in?
Yeah.
And where did I
Mhm.
lose you? Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
that's repeating yourself
Oh, man.
is part of the whole teaching experience.
I know. There was a teacher in the classroom with me today, and I was like, "Well, I did my best." And she was like, "Yeah, it's not going to be perfect." I was like, "It's not going to be perfect." And then a student chimed in, "It's never perfect." And we are like, "No, it's never perfect."
That's so funny.
I know.
That's that's hysterical. Oh my gosh. No, it's never perfect,
No.
but documentaries look perfect though.
Yes.
To me, they look perfect.
Which is funny though, because I think I like the ones that kind of show that rawness, where things they're interviewing someone in their messy house or their
Oh,
lived in
yeah.
house, you know, I should say.
Well, that's interesting that you say that because sometimes I feel like they couldn't have cleaned up. They didn't realize they were coming, or he's wearing this T-shirt with these shorts, and he didn't realize that he was going to be on camera. But I don't
Yeah.
think that's what matters. That's
Right.
they're getting them in their regular
Element.
un element, no bias, I guess.
Adds to the
But
story, I
see, I'm
guess.
I'm 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 putting judgment on all that. That's
I
my
know.
judging thing.
Yeah. Well, and I guess it
Yeah.
goes back to the context of like, well, how did this go? Is this the third day of trying to get them to be interviewed? Did they miss them 2 days before? And finally, now that, okay, well, we're doing it. This is the outfit. Like, he's mad. So he's got 10 minutes we got to shoot this thing and doesn't want to be interviewed again about this topic. Like, who knows what the backstory is? We don't hear that part typically.
Right. That's true.
But
That's
yeah.
true. I can't help it, but every time we say the word documentary or talk about this, I think of the series Mad About You,
Hmm.
where Paul Reiser's character, Paul Buckman, was a documentarian. He was a documentary filmmaker.
Hmm.
And I just those three words together I always think are so cool. Like,
It's a
that
cool
is
job.
so cool.
I know. What do you
Right?
mean? You documentary
Yeah, wow.
filmmaker.
Filmmaker. Wow, that is just so awesome.
So cool. I bet
You
he
know.
didn't get asked how does he make a living doing that.
No. No, for sure. That was such a cool thing to
Totally.
be that.
Mhm. It is a cool thing.
Yeah, it's like I'm 19 all over again. I guess we're all 19. We just get older. I
Wait, is
don't know.
that when you watched it?
Oh, no, 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 no.
No. Okay.
Um, no, because it came on in the
No, it came on when you were
90s.
in your 20s or 30s, right?
Well, it came on in the 90s, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was in my 30s. You have to put aside the reality when you watch these shows because it's not about how they made money, because obviously
Right.
that was the whole series about Friends was implausible.
Oh, yeah. That apartment?
Yeah.
No way.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
New
I
York
I
City.
was watching I was watching a housing documentary or whatever, and they were showing this basement apartment in New York, and it's very, very cool. But it was like 5 grand, and I'm like, "Yeah, it's just not this whole romantic idea of living in New York is not very romantic when you have to come up with 5 grand a month to live in a one-bedroom, basement apartment,"
I
you
know.
know?
I know.
So,
I know. I'm
yeah.
on New York City, or I see them pop up on TikTok. The different apartments that are
Oh, yeah.
open for inhabiting, and you're just like, I can stretch my arms across and touch the other wall, and they want
Right.
2,500 a month for this. What now? There's a
Yeah.
shared bathroom in the building. Like,
I know.
it's a different lifestyle, and it's awesome, but it's a lot of compromise.
It is a lot of compromise. That's something you could go back to your students tomorrow and say, "Let's revisit the word compromise. I've got a little story for you."
I got a story for you. Yeah, imagine you're an
Yeah.
adult.
But, people sacrifice size of apartment, obviously New York for New York, the
Right.
city, and
Yeah.
everything that it offers you.
Sure.
But whatever. We
Yeah.
digressed out of we were going on housing documentaries and we digressed a little bit, but that's
We did.
okay
It's okay.
because, it's the human experience.
Everything connects.
It actually does, and I liked what you were saying earlier about how you can watch several documentaries on the same subject and
Mhm.
get a little bit different slant
Yeah.
as to other people talking about the situation or just the way the interviewer asks the questions. And
Yeah.
that's when discernment actually becomes important
Yeah.
because
Absolutely.
who do you believe,
Right. I know. I
right?
know. I know. It's
Yeah,
so tough.
yeah, I
It's so
know.
tough. And then, yeah, it's really tricky because
It's
even
very
the
tricky.
people that the stories are about, I mean, what do they remember things the way they think they do or all those things? Yeah, it gets really
Oh,
complicated very
yeah.
fast. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I pride myself on having a pretty good memory, but I have noticed that I will not recall spaces the way I thought they were.
Mhm.
Right? And I was
Yeah.
like, I was steadfast that this is where I was standing in this space, and then I get there, I'm like, "Oh, it couldn't have been that way." So I'm
Right.
wondering how that alters
I
what
know, it just
happened.
morphs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know?
It's
Yeah.
freaky.
It is. It's a kinda interesting. And if you take pictures, that's one thing, but I think that taking pictures also has a tendency to keep you sort of separated from the memory
Yeah, at a
because you're not
distance.
really yeah, you're not really concentrating as much on the actual thing as you
Mhm.
are on taking the picture. Or a good exercise would be to try to remember it after so that you can keep it in your mind longer, I guess.
Yeah,
But,
totally.
yeah,
No, that's why
yeah.
eyewitness accounts aren't really that great.
No, they're pretty faulty,
They're pretty
actually.
faulty. Yeah.
Yeah, and
I
a lot of people
sometimes when
yeah,
I'm driving, I try to do something that's entertaining for my brain, and I'm like, "Okay, remember that license plate in front of me," and I repeat it, or "Oh, think about that car that cut me off," whatever it is,
right,
or think about the person walking down the street. Could I describe them? And a lot of
right,
times, seconds after I see something, I don't remember it correctly, or I
right,
already forget.
right.
So, and I'm relatively young, like that's saying a lot, I
Well
guess.
well, it's because we have other things on our mind.
Yeah, I think that is true. A lot of the time
Right,
it's too
right.
crammed to remember, especially
Maybe it's
my my
the
partner brought
moment.
up someone that I used to work with very briefly, and I was like, it was a traumatic experience. I don't remember their name. I'm sorry. I just wiped that part clean. It's like
Right.
I need to use that space for like more pertinent information. But in that moment, I was like, oh wow, that happened. That happened. Okay, brain. Thanks for looking out for me. Appreciate ya.
Well, maybe your brain was, maybe it wiped it out on purpose.
That's what I'm saying. It was like, let's
Yeah,
rid you of the names associated to that
right,
traumatic
right.
work experience.
Exactly, exactly, that's a good thing.
Yeah, it is. Oh my goodness. Okay, well,
I
back to
know.
documentaries. There's do we think this is kind of a document? I mean, not really, but we're sharing our lives with people who might care.
Right, so I think it's not necessarily a documentary in that it's documenting
Mhm.
what we our connection, our relationship, our remembrances,
Yeah.
and our thoughts and experiences
Mhm.
out into the ether, but at the
Mhm.
same time, we've recorded it, we videoed it, and so we have it for posterity. So in that
Yeah.
case, I would say it's documentary-ish,
Documentary-ish,
right? Because you are
historical
documenting.
ish. Yes, we're documenting in
Yes.
hopes to connect with others who want, a similar shared community.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yes.
But there's a lot of
And
nuance in life, isn't there? And that's the takeaway, I think, with documentaries and journalism and stories and the lived
yes.
experience. Yeah.
Yes.
I think that's
I
why I started this podcast too, because I think I wanted a space for us to connect and to hear your life about your life. And I also wanted a place to commiserate. So a lot of
yeah,
things at once. And I think
Kvetch.
historically speaking to the Jewish experience as well. So I think we're doing it.
I think for the most part, yeah, we're connecting.
We're connecting.
We're connecting.
We're
Yes.
commiserating.
Yes.
We're kvelling. We're
And
kvetching.
kvetching.
Okay, I just
Right.
had to say all the cud sounds. Okay, I'm done
Okay, good. I like it. I like it totally.
now. We'd love to hear from you. Send in your complaints and maybe they'll be featured on the show. On some platforms, you can even leave a voice message, and you can also leave a typed message in the Q&A box on other platforms. So please reach out to us if you want advice, if you have questions. We have episodes out twice monthly, so every other week there's a brand new Kvetchfest episode. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Kvetchfest, where complaining is cathartic. And don't forget, if something's on your chest, kvetch it off.